But with the help of the Vahki, order shall be maintained. But when the Great Shadow falls, the Vahki will ensure every Matoran's fate.
The Vahki were the cold, ruthless mechanical law enforcers of Metru Nui. But where did they come from? How did they function? And what eventually became of them? Also, what are some other variants of Vahki that you may not have known existed? That's what we're going to explore today. If you could show your support by leaving a like or a comment, it would be hugely appreciated. It really helps the channel out. Anyway, with that said, let's dive into today's video. So, let's start with how the Vahki came to be. The Vahki were not actually the first law enforcement units to be created for Metru Nui, with their predecessors being the Kraahu. These were designed by Nuparu on the orders of Turaga Duma. However, it soon became apparent that the Kraahu were not going to be suitable for the job, and the governing Turaga commanded that they be taken apart. There is actually a whole other story behind the Kraahu and what became of them later on, but for now all we need to know is that the Kraahu often left the Matoran too tired to work, and the replacement needed to be able to encourage labour and obedience among the Matoran. Anyway, after the failure of the Kraahu, the need for law enforcement in Metru Nui was still present, and Nuparu was commissioned once again to construct what would become to be known as the Vahki. They would be stored in and hooked up to hives, where the Vahki would go to be recharged or rest when not in service. A separate model was designed for each Metru, along with two other special units, which we will get into in a bit. So, the first Vahki units to be created were the Rozak, as they were the models assigned to Onu Metru, where the Vahki were initially created. Despite this, they were not necessarily the fastest or the strongest Vahki, but they were extremely determined to an almost zealous degree, sometimes risking their own destruction if it meant catching an offender. The Rozak wielded a stun staff which had telepathic-like capabilities, essentially allowing them to see and hear everything that the target could for a period of time. Next, let's take a look at the Vahki assigned to Po Metru, the district which helped Onu Metru in building the Vahki in the first place. These units were called Zadak and were physically the strongest of all the Vahki. These were the units chosen to not only serve as the guards of the Dark Hunter prison, which was located in Po Metru, but also as the bodyguards of the Turaga Duma himself, as well as to guard the Colosseum. Their stun staff made Matoran more suggestible to commands. However, these models of Vahki were known to use their staves the least, and in contrast to the Bordak, the Zadak preferred the fight over the chase, and were usually the most eager to get into combat. This led them to sometimes overlook Matoran violations of the law and entangle themselves in situations involving escaped Rahi. So let's get into the Bordak, the Vahki assigned to Gar Metru. These were considered to be the most tactically astute type of Vahki, as they were assigned to Gar Metru, the only ones with any real ability to operate underwater, on one occasion falling foul of the Dweller in the Deep, as Nokama retrieved her great Kanoka disc. Speaking of Nokama, the Tower of Water actually fell under the influence of one of these Vahki, and they used their Staff of Loyalty to push Vakama off the top of a shoot tower. These staves would instill a powerful desire for justice within its target, causing even the closest friends to turn on each other. It was in and amongst the shoots of Li Metru that one would find the Vorzak. Despite their programming to move around obstacles, the Vorzak were extremely destructive and would often just smash through anything that got in their way. They were the antithesis to the Bordak in the sense that they would often want to end the chase as quickly as possible, with complete disregard to property as they hunted down even a single Matoran lawbreaker. They were equipped with, in my opinion, one of the more disturbing tools in the Staff of Erasing, which essentially eliminated the target's higher mental functioning, leaving all of their motor skills behind so they could continue to work. As a result, so-called shamblers were often seen wandering around Li Metru. Tar Metru was where the Nurak were assigned to and were required to be the most patient of the Vahki. With their charge being to guard the important furnaces and foundries of the city, these units of Vahki would not take risks in chasing Matoran or confronting powerful opponents, so would instead wait in ambush and, if they needed to, strike from a position of surprise and with larger numbers. They were equipped with a Staff of Command, which was used against Matau as the Tower Metru attempted to escape the city during the Great Cataclysm, actually causing the tower to turn their transport around and back towards the crumbling city, but were eventually able to escape when Pterodax overloaded the Vahki's power grids as he absorbed the city's power. So the last of the regular Vahki were the Kirak assigned to Ko Metru. Interestingly, these Vahki had the ability to perceive where their target would go, thus arriving at their destination before them. This in a Metru dedicated to telling the future. They would make next to no noise as they climbed the knowledge towers, on one occasion striking the Matoran Tahuti with their Staff of Confusion as the Tower Metru searched for the Ko Metru Great Disc. This essentially caused the target to lose all sense of time and space, not too dissimilar from the Vorzak of Li Metru. However, these were considered a little more merciful than the other. So, with the regular Vahki units explained, let's touch a little on the other models that existed in Metru Nui which you may not have known about. The first is Kraahu, which was an elite model of Vahki and was used much less often, primarily for dealing with Rahi that escaped from the archives. Instead of one central mechanism controlling their bodies like the regular Vahki, the Kraahu had several located throughout its body, allowing it to split apart and have its separate pieces operate independently. When combined, the Kraahu could release a cloud of gas that would stun opponents, presumably so that any escaped Rahi could then be safely transported back to the archives. And finally, we have the Kranua, the other elite Vahki model that was deployed much less frequently than the regular Vahki and even the Kraahu. It was designed and constructed under wraps by Nuparu under the orders of Turagadum, along with a select team of Pomatoran builders. This was a specialised peacekeeping device used for crowd control, with the ability to dissolve into a sand-like substance and reappear somewhere else. This allowed them to track down Rahi or lawbreakers in the most inaccessible locations, but this ability was once used against it by Vakama as he rapidly heated the Kranua as it transformed from solid to sand, turning it into glass. And that wraps up all the different variants of Vahki. Now, as for what happened to them, we've touched on it a little bit already, but the Vahki were destroyed mostly during Pterodax's takeover, as Metru Nui was shattered, and the Vahki hives were severely damaged by the subsequent Great Cataclysm. The escape of countless Rahi from the archives during the earthquakes, along with the arrival of the Vizorak horde shortly after, basically saw the end of the Vahki as an effective force. But that is a story for another time. As always guys, thank you for watching. If you could leave a like and comment, it would be massively appreciated as it really helps the channel out. That is all from me, and I will see you next time.